Hello, I'm Steve Bell, Chairman and CEO of Tennessee Bank and Trust. We are a privately owned bank with offices in Cool Springs and Green Hills focused on customers that would like traditional, personalized banking with high-tech services. Our staff of experienced bankers have been empowered to take care of their customers. We are a business that happens to be a bank, and our customers tell us the difference is clear.
I'm going to jump right in. We got some great experts, and we're going to talk today about branding, and we're going to talk about how to engage your employees to be part of the branding, to be brand ambassadors. A lot of companies I know just forget about that internal force they have and how effective it is, how cost efficient it is. But branding means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I thought we'd start with you, John Lowry, since you're a professor over at Lipscomb. And in your opinion, what is a brand?
Well, simply stated, I think your brand is how the marketplace defines you. And there are a couple of things that go into that. One of them is perception, what you see in terms of a lot of the marketing and communications. Another thing that goes into that is the experience that people have when they come and engage your business. And as we think about engaging employees in that process, that's where it's critically important that they understand and are tied into the overall brand of whatever the enterprise is, because the experience that people have is going to be significant in terms of how they feel about you, and more importantly, as we found at Lipscomb, how they feel about themselves. So much of branding is not what people think about you, but what they think about themselves when they're going to your university, or they're engaging your company for products or services or something like that. So I think branding has a lot to do in terms of providing a experience for people that is positive, and that requires everyone on the team to contribute to that.
Great. And we know it's not a logo, a slogan. You know, those of us in advertising and PR would love to think, oh, it's the slogan, it's the tagline, it's the jingle, but it's not. It's everything around that. And Bill,
can I piggyback that? Branding is nothing more than a promise. But it's not the cause, it's the effect. The cause are these people that we're talking about. We're not in the hamburger business, we're not in the legal business, we're in the people business. Everybody around the table. So they are not just a part of, they are the key.
and how can you monitor that, Beth? Just, you know, your people are not under one corporate roof. They're all around the state, all around the city. How do you engage them or teach them, train them? And I know you can't train them to smile, but how do you communicate with them to carry your brand?
We have over 40 different ways in any particular year that a consultant can connect back with our company. We consult all over the city of Nashville, so the consultants 99% of the time are out with the client. Mm-hmm. And so we look for ways to get them connected back to keep that alignment in terms of the brand message, our vision, what we're trying to accomplish. And we do that in a variety of ways, from team connections monthly that we get together and do experience sharing, to getting involved in the community. This fall we'll be part of the Dragon Boat races as an example, a way to pull people together to have that connection and that bond.
For us, a key is that you have got to focus on your leaders in your organization. You've got to give them the messages, the tools, the information, the accomplishments that you've made, and let that information cascade through the organization. So we think that it's important to focus on leaders if you want to reach all your employees. And we know employees want to hear from the people they report to, and they want to know, what does this have to do with the work that I'm doing?
You have to understand the culture first. I mean, no matter how talented employees that you're recruiting will be, if if the employees they don't fit in the culture of your company, it's not going to work. And in our company, what we do first is we look at our culture, if we're well set, but then we look at the personality of the individuals. And sometimes we go like, he has all the credentials, or she has all the credentials, but really it's not going to fit. So we try to maintain that culture, just live it, very dynamic. And so that's one thing that sometimes even consultants, they come in, they make recommendations, but really they don't drill into the culture of the company first.
And I think it's important that the interview process and sort of vetting those employees is really important. But then kind of once they've entered your company, part of what we do, we have a fairly formalized orientation process. And the real goal of that process is to introduce them to our culture. So, because I think employees come into a company and they see what's on the mission statement, they hear a little bit, but they really start looking around to see what is the culture of this place? How do they want me to act? Do I fit in with this culture? Because you may or may not get that through an initial interview, but initially introducing them to the culture and being certain from day one that and our orientation process actually includes leadership, where we communicate that culture of honesty, integrity, respect. And we really think that if an employee, our communication with them is primarily around initially how we expect to treat them. Because we really think that if an employee feels that they're treated with integrity and honesty and respect and trust, that we trust them, then they'll deliver that when they go to the doorstep, a home or a business, then they will deliver that same approach to our customers that we've kind of delivered to them. So it's not so much about how you need to treat the customer, it's how we intend to treat you, and that fosters in them a desire to do the same for the customer.
Leadership, as you so well said, is the key, and leadership is about casting a vision. It's about affirming, catching people doing something good and praising it. It's about pushing credit down. It's about empowering. And then it's about feedback when they get off base, but that's not a punishment thing, that's a celebratory thing. It's the same kind of thing as our kids. What do we do when they're learning to walk? We create boundaries and then celebrate every time they fail. We're clapping and praising and attaboying every time they fail and they learn to walk. Well, leadership's the same kind of thing and pushing credit down.
Louise, you've got, I don't know how many employees at CCA, but they're not all under one roof.
Corrections Corporation of America owns and operates 65 prisons, jails, and detention centers for government. Similar to CHS, we face those opportunities of having a very diverse workforce in multiple locations. What we have recognized, as so many businesses have today, is that you need to meet your employees and communicate to them where they are. What we have really been focusing on is going from one-way communication, where we're delivering news, to three-way communication, where we're creating a community that lets employees communicate with one another. And social media and the digital age is perfect for that.
You know, a lot of businesses are very nervous about social media, so I'm glad you talked about that. And I'm interested from any of you or all of you, what kind of restrictions you put on social media, or do you just let it fly?
We do have a formal social media policy. It started out as a casual guideline, and then once you get your lawyers and your HR team involved, it becomes very rigid, as it needs to be. And the goal is to encourage employees to be your ambassador, but also have them know some of the restrictions on what's confidential, what's inappropriate. And then we've had every single employee read and sign the social media policy.
So they have to agree to further the brand. Basically, that's what you're saying. If it doesn't further the brand, it's outside the parameters of what they're supposed to use that for. Mm-hmm. David, I've been in your place and was fascinated by just the response I got when I walked in the door. I was a stranger, I went in, everybody was so friendly, and you're a family business, right?
That's right. And a lot of what we've been talking about, I think, is very relevant to us, even though we're a much smaller company, only 175 employees. So we complain about having our employees at different job sites and things, but it's nothing like what you all are dealing with. And unlike other companies that can decide, what are our values and what do we want to be about. Our company is 72 years old. We already had a culture. We already had values. So we were able to bring a group of people together and talk about, well, what are our values? What are they? And people kind of wrote down their different ideas. And the interesting thing was when we got them all together, yep, these are them. I mean, everybody kind of agreed. And I think they probably came from my grandfather. But that's so important as a foundation. It's what you said, Bill. It's how we treat each other is really a good part of it. It's not just how the employer treats the employee, it's how employee treats employee. And from there, it's how they treat our customers. And so it's back to the ego thing we were talking about earlier. It's turns out it's not about me, it's about them, And that's true if everybody is that way. And of course, when we screen candidates and we talk to people, that's very important. We want healthy self-worth, that kind of thing. But if it's all about them, that's probably not going to fit in our culture.
John, you were getting ready to say something.
Yeah, I think there's a generational element to this as well that's really important. We deal with primarily 18 to 22-year-olds, and frankly, they just see the world differently, and they see the workplace very differently. And so if we think about generating loyalty and having customers that will expand and advance your brand, the millennium generation specifically, thinking about how to engage them to do that is very different. Because you have a generation of people that are more loyal to manager than they are company. When they leave a company, the research shows that what they're really leaving is a manager. They're not necessarily leaving as a company. And the research also shows that as they embrace values, they embrace the values of a manager and not necessarily the company. And so thinking from a leadership standpoint about how to equip managers to deal with the incoming generation into the workforce, it requires a completely different skill set because the millennium generation specifically is just driven in a different way.
Several of you have talked about not tests, but kind of interview situations. Do any of you have any advice to those who are listening or watching us about any particular kind of test you find helpful, or any range of questions? Beth, you might have some ideas.
One of the things that we have added to the front end is what we call a writing exercise. And it's not really a writing exercise, it's to get them to demonstrate how they think, how they organize, how they communicate. And so we'll give them a sample problem. And you could really do this, I think, with any position in any company, but a sample consulting problem or engagement or situation. And their job is to then list the 10 or 20 questions they would ask the client, and then flowchart that process. And that gives us a way to really see how they think, how they communicate, and we have found that to be very, very helpful.
One small thing I might add that most people probably do, but we didn't do well for a long time, is really just the way we interview with teams as opposed to having one-on-one interviews. We have really expanded that throughout most of our company. So we kind of intentionally think about who's going to be on that team, who are the best people to interview that person, and then have the collective wisdom of those 5 people.
We do the same thing, but we take it all the way down to our employees, and we bring them on and they say, listen, we're going to be bringing a new supervisor. We want to feel how you guys feel about it, And if the feedback is being sure that you include everything is inclusive, because at the end of those employees are going to be reporting to this person, which you were saying before, John, is that. You don't want to get just the attitude of the manager, you want to get the attitude of the company. So
I've had the privilege of taking a tour with Nelson of his facility and meeting just a whole handful of his employees, and I was fascinated with how interested Nelson was in their personal lives. But it was fascinating the personal connection that Nelson had, and I think that's a big part of this as well.
So this is how we work. We don't have, and we have an open door policy as well. Everybody comes in, we talk, we share, we celebrate, and when there's the rewarding, I don't believe in a scheduled rewarding. If you set goals when you're going to reward your employees, then your employees are going to excel a few days before the rewarding time.
Symbolic things are very helpful when you're in the CEO role or other leadership roles. And this was when I was running Sonic, and the lady who headed up our committee that represented the employees came to me and asked me far enough out that you'd say yes to anything. And she said, would you let us draw names and let the top 5 officers change jobs for a day with us? And I was drawn by divine providence or luck as the receptionist switchboard person. It was the longest day of my life. There's a rhythm to it. I finally got into it about the last hour of the day.
We introduced this young lady. She's our director of first impressions. But the interview was, we needed a receptionist to help us out to do also some admin. And when she interviewed, she said, I'm interviewing for your position of director of first impressions. And it is amazing how the welcoming of a person gives you the culture right on the spot of the company.
And I think that that's so key. We did a significant merger of another hospital company into our hospital company about 5 years ago. And when we did, we started an initiative we called Community Cares. And the goal of that program is to create hospitals where physicians prefer to practice, where employees choose to work, and where patients want to receive care. And there isn't a day that goes by that you don't hear somebody say that mantra and you don't read it somewhere in a communication. And so for 5 years, we've gone back and said this over and over again, and we've trained people on behaviors that lead to those results. And it does not matter if you're saving a life in an emergency room, or mopping a hallway in a hospital, or analyzing data in the corporate office. That's what we're all here to do every single day. And when you can tie to a purpose and make people feel that they are part of something larger, of a value and a goal that they can believe in, it transforms the workplace.
That whole concept of purpose is so important, and it defines what your culture is, and you need to not just be able to say it, but people need to feel it. I mean, it has to be real. It has to be. Somebody said earlier that a person was a good leader because you were transparent. It's because you're genuine. And I think that is such a key part of it. You know, we came up with the same process I described for the values, that our culture is to create a culture of excellence that helps our people reach their potential and has a positive impact on everyone they touch. When we talk about that to people, that when they're working there, they know because everyone there is trying to help them get better. And even when we have people that leave us, are they better off for the time they spent with us? And most people will say yes. And that, to me, is success. I mean, I don't want people leaving, right? But sometimes there's another place they could go that's better for them and their family, and I understand that. But if they grew and were better off for that time, I feel like that's our purpose of our company. So we've achieved that.
We've actually, we're trying to develop a culture that says we have a purpose even beyond Lee Company. We're toying with an idea of giving people paid time off to work in 501c3s of their choice, and then they have a contest where they film a little YouTube of their work, this group of employees that might go to this particular organization, and then they submit all of those, and the winning submission will get maybe a $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 gift to their particular charity, and engaging our people in a culture of giving or a culture of serving that even goes beyond Lee Company. Because this new generation, they are about more than what our father's generation was about with regard to what they do at work.
Oswald Chambers says in a spiritual way, but it applies to life. The enemy of being our utmost for his highest isn't evil. We say no to that pretty well. It's how to say no to good. If you say yes to all good things, then you become impotent to be effective at anything. And so, you know, when I got a call from South Africa saying we want to buy the territorial rights for Sonic for this country, I could immediately say, no, we don't know how to do that. Or when I got a call about, from well-qualified prospective franchisees, can I put kiosk at ballparks? It was, we just don't know how to do that. We're going to stick to doing the things we know how to do. So mission statement, in addition to being something that employees can rally around and feel a key part of, it also allows you to say no to good things.
We have talked about what some people would consider sort of soft kinds of things, but Am I right in remembering that in your plant, actually, you have on the wall the goals of the day? I mean, it's not just how you treat each other. Yes, that's important, and I agree with David. If you treat each other well, you're going to do that for your clients. But do you have that?
We actually measure production by the minute. You walk through a screen and you'll see how so-and-so is doing. And they already created a culture that before they take the break, they stop, oh, I'm doing good. And if they're not doing good, it's probably the equipment, it's not them, or I need some help, or I don't feel good today at home. I have some issues. That's okay. Take off. And that's the other thing. You got to be flexible. You know what? You need to go home. That's okay. Just go home and don't worry. And that's what you got to create.
Well, I just want to make sure that we cover that we're not just talking about how everybody feels. We are talking about being productive and being efficient. And so I just think that's a great example of how that's part of your brand. I mean, your brand is your most efficient company you could hire. And that's because you have instilled that in your employees. They have pride in it, and they're rewarded for it.
I want to piggyback off of that what we do, or what we've learned, is we have to measure production and give that information back to the people that are making it happen. Not because we're sitting in the office with cigars seeing how productive we are. That's not relevant. I mean, that doesn't work. But if you show them a graph that says, here is what we have to work with, here's how much you've used and here's how much you've earned based on production, you don't have to explain that. You just post it. They get it. It's a picture. And that by giving them that every week, week's about as short as we've gotten right now, but then they know. We don't even have to, we can ask them questions, but the truth is they know if it's not good, they know that's not good and they need to do something different, and they're in the best position to figure out what to do differently.
They're also in the best position to tell you what that information should be for the most part. What we've done is said, you give us what you think your key performance indicators are, your KPIs, and then we will post those. And they generally come up with what they know, how they know they ought to be performing, and we post them internally in the office. We post them by group all over the building, and they're in the hallways for people to see, and they're all graphical, and they're little dashboards. And so every month you can walk around and look at everybody's dashboards.
A couple of things that we track and really monitor that tie to our culture. One is, how much money are we spending on training? Training is typically the first budget line item to be cut in a major corporation, and we see that as a real opportunity to grow and differentiate ourselves. And then the second one is, how much are we giving back to the community? Not just how much are we financially giving back to the organizations, but how many leaders do we have on boards and communities, and how much are we doing in terms of community service, and then pro bono work that we do with some nonprofits.
An important point that I think all of you have touched on is the whole idea of having employees engaged in setting the goals and even establishing the values for the company. And I'm reminded of a story that Coach K told when he was over at Lipscomb speaking last year about when he took over the Olympic team. And he says, here I am, a college coach, but in my locker room is LeBron and Kobe. And he says, I couldn't give them a curfew. He says, there's no way in the world I could give them a curfew. And so he says, in that moment I recognized that I wasn't going to be able to be authoritarian, and so it required a different kind of leadership. And so he talked about how he turned to Kobe and said, all right, Kobe, we've got to come up with standards for this team. Why don't you throw one out there? And Kobe says, well, no one be late. If the bus leaves at 7:30, we're all on the bus at 7:30. Coach, anyone have a problem with that? I said, no. I said, all right, that's Kobe's rule. So now if they broke the rule, it was Kobe's rule, it wasn't my rule. And then at the end, what I thought was so powerful was when Coach K then had them all give him the authority to enforce their rules. And to then take that and apply it in business in terms of saying, let's all together come up with what our goals and what our values and what's that going to be, but then you all give me the authority to then lead you in terms of accomplishing objectives that we all own and we've all been a part of creating.
At Sonic, we did this button one year that was a square, and it said yes in the middle, and then it had values around it. The point was, the answer is yes, what's the question? And the point we were making with our employees was, if you happen to make a mistake with one of your customers, if that's not solved on the spot, by the time they get to me with the complaint, they're a terrorist. They are out to do us damage, and they do severe damage. But when you go to a restaurant and have a bad experience, you tell on the average 22 people. When you have a good experience, you tell 4 people. And you don't go to restaurants where your friends tell you they had a bad experience. So it costs us very little for you to solve it on the spot. You are empowered to do that. If it's give the next meal on us, here's a card that allows you to do that.
That's so important. I'm always impressed when I can tell an employee is empowered to fix my problem. It's very impressive. Tommy, I'm going to ask you maybe the most difficult question. We've talked about branding and what our companies are, but with all companies, mistakes are made. Things happen, right? Nobody here has a perfect company where every day everything goes right. How important is it to explain to so many employees when something happens and it's not consistent with your brand?
I think you've just got to be honest, and you've got to, when you have something go wrong in an organization, you have to help people understand why it went wrong and what you're doing to stop it from happening again. And if you have an organization that has the right culture and that has the right values, you learn from mistakes and you build upon those, and you become stronger and you become better because of those things. You never want them to happen, but you can't shy away from it when they do. You have to deal with them head on.
As long as you depersonalize it, I think it's helpful, because it's not about that one person or that team that made the mistake, but it's about learning.
In our company, we depersonalize it from the employee standpoint, but we try to personalize it from the customer standpoint.
Yes.
We communicate regularly to our folks that every time we get a complaint, statistically, there are 19 other people who haven't complained but who have had the same bad experience. So we do try to kind of make sure they recognize we didn't just have 5 complaints today. Mrs. Jones was unhappy with the way we did this, and she's an important person, and she matters to us, and there's 20 others, and approach.
That's very powerful. I think what the employee can hear it from us, but it doesn't mean as much as when they hear this specific example from the client.
There are 2 kinds of mistakes. We're talking about the ones that are within the boundaries of our culture, our cultural boundaries. But there are mistakes that occur that are outside of the cultural boundaries. And I think you have to deal with those violently, quickly, and differently.
Yeah, you can't just talk it, you got to walk it. You got to walk the culture. I know we're coming to the end of our time, believe it or not, because it's been such fabulous information. I've been taking notes to take back to the office. But is there anything on anyone's mind in terms of, that we haven't talked about today, in terms of branding and something that you can bring to the table that worked for you?
If we hire somebody that doesn't fit, a good person, but they just don't fit, how do you all deal with that?
I think you hire slowly and you fire quickly, and I don't remember the exact quote to that, but I think it's true. A person that does not fit in the culture should stick out like a sore thumb, or you have a fractured culture. So it's obvious, and the right thing to do for the company and for the individual is to find opportunities for that person. So that's sort of my short answer.
As in other opportunities?
There's other opportunity outside of the company. Yes.
Difficult thing to do.
When it
Difficult.
becomes apparent they're not going to be successful inside your company, you're doing them a favor to
You
help
really
them go
are.
someplace else.
Hard to do.
And
Hard
we
to do,
usually,
yeah, especially as your culture changes. Our company's 70 years old. We have 40-year employees. Things are really different today than they were 30 years ago. Our culture's different. Our expectations are different. But you're sitting there with a 36-year employee who's 58 years old and not fitting. And just to throw out there, it's tough. It's tough.
I want to thank everybody. This has been a wonderful roundtable, and I think we all learned something, got to share something. Thank you all very, very much.